"One day I will become a priest, and I will never be poor again." The words escaped young Marcus's lips like a whispered curse. Golden sunlight poured through cracked rooftops of the small village homes. In one of the oldest mud houses, 8-year-old Marcus sat barefoot on the dusty floor. His father polished worn-out shoes with trembling hands. The scent of dust mixed with old oil filled the air. Papa was preparing for their local church, the only place in town where people still wore their best, even in poverty. Marcus's eyes sparkled with dangerous curiosity. "Papa, why do people bring food and money to church?" His father looked up, smiling faintly while tightening his frayed belt. "It's Thanksgiving, my son. We bring gifts to thank God for what He has done for us." "But how do the yams and rice get to God? He lives in heaven, right?" The old man chuckled, rubbing his graying beard. "Well, it doesn't go up to heaven. The priest decides what to do with them. It all belongs to him." A flicker of understanding, no ambition, passed through young Marcus's eyes. That moment, quiet as it seemed, planted a seed that would one day bloom into something terrifyingly dangerous. At church that day, Marcus couldn't stop staring. Bags of rice, crates of drinks, roasted goats, bundles of cash, all laid before the golden altar like offerings to a king. The priest barely spoke of God. He was too busy collecting gifts with a smile that never reached his cold eyes. Marcus watched the entire scene like a predator studying prey. The priest didn't look hungry. He looked powerful, worshipped, wealthy. Marcus clenched his small fists and whispered the words that would change everything. Years passed like pages in a dark fairy tale. The boy became a man. The man became a monster in priestly robes. Reverend Father Marcus was now known across the entire city. His eloquent sermons echoed through marble halls. His long flowing robes shimmered with golden threads. Church members called him Daddy Divine in trembling reverence. No one dared question his absolute authority. His cathedral was a monument built from the tears of desperate donors. Marble floors that reflected the light of imported chandeliers. Golden pulpit that towered over the congregation like a throne. Imported pews that cost more than most people's homes. But something was terrifyingly wrong. Father Marcus didn't just dislike poor people. He hated them with a burning passion. The smell of poverty made his stomach turn. Patched-up clothes reminded him of his shameful past. Trembling voices asking for help triggered his deepest rage. They reminded him too much of who he used to be, and who he had sworn to God he would never become again. At his church, only the wealthy could breathe near the front. If your dress wasn't designer or your car wasn't shining, the ushers had clear instructions. Direct them to the back, or better yet, outside. During offering time, he strutted around with a golden microphone, his voice booming like a carnival announcer. "Brother Kingston gave $2 million today." The crowd would roar in manufactured admiration. "Daddy Divine is truly connected to heaven," some would whisper. "He prays and money rains down," others would gasp. But there were murmurs too. Dark murmurs from broken souls who left his church bleeding. Judged, rejected, destroyed. They called it the rich man's cathedral, a palace of pride disguised as a place of prayer. It was the first Sunday of November, Thanksgiving Sunday. The air crackled with electric energy and expensive perfumes. Wealthy families arrived in designer suits and convoy cars. But one woman came differently. Mama Rosa. She was new in town, a tired old widow with a face carved by suffering. But her eyes still burned with unshakable faith. She had buried her beloved husband just 1 month ago, after years of watching him waste away in her arms. With all she had left, she decided to thank God for giving her strength to survive the storm. She wore her only black wrapper, neatly tied around her thin waist. Her blouse had holes, but was carefully ironed with desperate pride. In her trembling hands were 2 small, dry tubers of yam. Her Thanksgiving offering. Her everything. She arrived at the church early, even before the choir. As she tried to sit in the front row, the usher's hand shot out like a weapon. "Mama, you can't sit here." "But I came early," she whispered softly. Father Marcus gave strict instructions. "Please go to the back." With a quiet sigh that carried the weight of a lifetime of rejection, she turned. She walked slowly to the back row. She didn't complain. She didn't curse. She just smiled gently, humming a worship song under her breath. When Thanksgiving time arrived, the wealthy families were called first. They paraded forward with baskets overflowing with fruits, bundles of cash thick enough to choke on, live goats bleeding in confusion, sound systems worth more than cars. Father Marcus beamed and danced with them. placing his hands on their heads in theatrical prayer. Then Mama Rosa's name was whispered by a nervous assistant. A small, fragile figure stepped forward. All eyes turned like spotlights on prey. Her dry yams shook gently in her weathered hands as she approached the altar. Father Marcus froze. His smile vanished like smoke. What happened next would shake the very foundations of heaven and earth. "What is this?" Father Marcus's voice cut through the cathedral like a blade. He pointed at Mama Rosa's yams with disgust dripping from his finger. "Are you here to thank God or to poison him?" The church erupted in cruel laughter. Mama Rosa stood frozen, her hands trembling like autumn leaves. "This woman must be a witch," Father Marcus thundered. His voice echoed off the marble walls like thunder from hell. "Two dried yams? Is this a sacrifice or a joke?" Mama Rosa said nothing. Her lips quivered. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. "Get out of here!" Father Marcus screamed. His face twisted with pure hatred. "Take your poison with you." The laughter echoed through the cathedral like demons celebrating. She turned slowly, her head bowed in shame. Even the ushers giggled behind their hands. No one helped her. No one defended her. No one spoke up for the woman who had given everything. Outside the church, Mama Rosa fell to her knees on the cold concrete. "Oh God," she whispered to the empty sky. "Did I come to thank you, only to be cursed?" Tears finally escaped, rolling down her cheeks like rivers of pain. She wiped them with the edge of her wrapper. Standing on shaking legs, she tried to cross the street. But her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Her legs gave way beneath her. A truck horn blared through the air like a final judgment. Tires screeched against asphalt. And then, silence. Complete, devastating silence. She was gone. The woman who came to thank God was now standing before his throne. But her story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Because what Father Marcus didn't know was that Mama Rosa's death would trigger something unstoppable. A chain of events that would bring his golden empire crashing down. The seed he had planted as a poor boy was about to bear its poisonous fruit. And the harvest was coming faster than he could ever imagine.
Please watch this thrilling story till the end to see who triumphs finally, and tell us in the comments which character you loved the most. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know if you want part 2. Let's enjoy.
The next day, her story exploded across every social media platform. Old widow humiliated at church dies hours later. God's house or fashion parade? Rich man's priest rejects poor widow's offering. The headlines spread like wildfire through a drought-stricken forest. Christians wept openly in the streets. Others mocked with bitter laughter. Some stopped going to church altogether. Unbelievers finally had ammunition for their arguments. "That's exactly why I don't go to church, hypocrites." But Father Marcus remained completely unfazed. Standing tall behind his golden pulpit, he doubled down on his cruelty. "God deserves the best," he declared boldly during his next sermon. His voice boomed with arrogant confidence. "And poor people simply don't belong at the front." The remaining congregation shifted uncomfortably in their designer seats. But fear kept their mouths sealed shut. What Father Marcus didn't know was that his kingdom was already crumbling. Cracks were forming in the foundation. His reputation was bleeding out like a wounded animal. And somewhere in the shadows, a dying billionaire was watching. Chief Benjamin Akoli sat in his black SUV, rain blurring the tinted windows. The soft beeping of his heart monitor was the only sound in the suffocating silence. The doctor's words echoed in his mind like a death sentence. "Stage 4 cancer, sir. It's terminal." He had heard those words before in movies, but now they were brutally real. His time was running out like sand through broken fingers. Months, maybe weeks. He was alone in the world. No children to mourn him. No wife to remember him. Everyone around him wanted only his money, his name, his connections. But no one truly cared about his dying soul. "What's left?" he whispered to the rain-streaked window. His secretary, Daniel, a quiet and observant young man, sat beside him. "Sir, maybe we can use the time you have left to do something meaningful. Something that will outlive your body." Chief Benjamin nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Yes, I want to give back to God before I meet him face to face." "Forget the mega churches," Chief Benjamin interrupted Daniel's research. "I want to find a church that truly serves God." His voice was weak but determined. "One that helps the poor, not the proud. A place where people are healed, not humiliated." Daniel hesitated, knowing what he was about to suggest was dangerous. "There's one church in town everyone talks about, sir. Huge cathedral, richest in the city, but the rumors about the priest. "Let's go there," Chief Benjamin said suddenly. "Today." "But sir, I think we should." "No appointments. No recognition. I'll disguise myself." His eyes burned with fierce determination. "Let's see if their love for God includes strangers and the poor." Meanwhile, back at the cathedral, Father Marcus stood proudly at his golden altar. His robe was embroidered with golden crosses and tiny diamonds that caught the light. He spoke not of sin or salvation, but of status and sacrifice, of money and miracles. "God loves a cheerful giver," he announced to the crowd. "And the more you give, the more you receive. Who among you will sow a seed of 5 million today?" Thunderous applause shook the marble walls. Ushers passed around velvet offering bags like collection plates for greed. The choir sang about abundance and prosperity. Wealth was no longer just a testimony. It had become the gospel itself. Just then, the massive church doors creaked open. Every head turned in perfect synchronization. A man walked in slowly, leaning heavily on a worn wooden cane. His clothes were old and stained with mysterious marks. His sandals were completely worn out. A faded cap covered his head like a disguise. But his eyes were sharp, watching everything with laser focus. It was Chief Benjamin in perfect disguise. He made his way to a side bench, far from the spotlight's glare. Daniel followed silently behind, posing as a humble assistant. The trap was set. The test had begun. And Father Marcus had no idea he was about to face his judgment day. Father Marcus glanced at the disguised billionaire once. His eyes immediately filled with disgust and rage. He leaned toward one of his ushers and whispered venomously, "Who let those beggars in here?" "They just walked in, sir," the usher replied nervously. "Well, walk them out." Father Marcus's voice dripped with pure hatred. "This isn't a refugee camp. This is God's sanctuary, not a garbage dump." The usher hesitated, but Father Marcus's patience had evaporated. He raised his voice so the entire congregation could hear. "You, old man with the cane." His voice cut through the worship music like a sword. The music stopped instantly. Everyone turned to stare. "Did you lose your way? The Beggars' Center is down the street." The disguised billionaire didn't respond. His heart was breaking, but his face remained calm. "You must be insane to walk in here looking like that." Father Marcus continued his public execution. "Do you want to bring curses into God's house with your poverty?" Soft, cruel laughter rippled through the congregation. Someone even pulled out their phone to record the humiliation. Chief Benjamin stood up slowly, his hands trembling on his cane. "I thought this was a place for the broken," he said quietly. His voice carried the weight of dying hope. "But it seems only the beautiful are allowed to worship here." Father Marcus scoffed with theatrical disgust. "God deserves honor, not pity parties. Please leave before you defile this sacred altar." The old man turned and walked out slowly. Each step echoed like a judge's gavel. Outside, he leaned on his cane and looked up at the cloudy sky. Tears mixed with raindrops on his weathered face. "So it's true," he whispered to Daniel. "This church isn't about God. It's about gold." What Father Marcus didn't realize was that he had just sealed his own fate. The richest man in the city had just witnessed his heart, and found it completely bankrupt. The countdown to destruction had officially begun. 3 weeks later, the news broke like a nuclear bomb across every social media platform. Billionaire Chief Benjamin donates entire estate to orphanage after church rejects him. Reveals he visited churches in disguise before death. God lives among the humble, not the proud, he says in final statement. The article included devastating photos. One showed a glowing orphanage receiving a massive check. Another showed Father Marcus pointing accusingly at the disguised billionaire in church. The internet exploded. Shares, comments, and reactions poured in like a digital tsunami. Church members were absolutely stunned. That was him. Daddy Divine chased away a billionaire? He could have changed everything here. We could have been the richest church in the country. Father Marcus's phone rang nonstop with panicked calls. His hands shook as he read the viral posts. His perfectly constructed world was collapsing in real time. He tried desperately to spin the story during his emergency Sunday service. "Do not be deceived," he shouted from his golden pulpit. Sweat poured down his face like a guilty confession. "The devil disguises himself as an angel of light." That man was not sent by God, but the people were no longer clapping. They sat in stunned silence. Ashamed, confused, angry. After the service, a group of church elders surrounded him like a tribunal. "Enough is enough," Elder Thompson declared. His voice shook with righteous fury. You have turned God's house into a circus." Elder Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You humiliated a widow until she died. You humiliated a dying billionaire who came to give. What else have you done behind closed doors?" The questions came like arrows in battle. A petition began circulating that very day. Then protests outside the church. Then the denominational council called an emergency meeting. In less than 1 month, Father Marcus was stripped of his title, removed from his golden throne, cast out like the hypocrite he had become. The once magnificent cathedral was now empty, a cold monument to pride, greed, and dreams corrupted by darkness. But this was not the end of the story. This was the beginning of something far more shocking. Because what nobody knew was that the fall of Father Marcus would reveal secrets so dark, they would shake the very foundations of faith itself. The once vibrant cathedral that echoed with choirs and applause now stood like a tomb. Dust gathered on the golden pulpit like snow on a grave. The offering bowls sat untouched, reflecting nothing but emptiness. The parking lot, once filled with luxury SUVs and convoys, was now a ghost town. Even the wind that whistled through the compound seemed to be mourning something long dead. Father Marcus sat in his private mansion behind the church, a luxurious house built with what he once called seed offerings. His white robe lay crumpled on the floor like a discarded costume. His once glowing skin was now pale with terror and sleepless nights. What disturbed him most wasn't the scandal or the shame. It was the silence. No one came to see him anymore. Not even the wealthy families he once elevated above God himself. The phone that once rang with praise now sat silent as death. The loyal members who once knelt to greet him now crossed the street when they saw him coming. He had become a living ghost, a walking reminder of what pride could destroy. He stared at a photo on his wall, a younger version of himself in fresh priestly robes, smiling brightly on his ordination day. The dream had seemed so pure back then. Or had it? He remembered the moment the old bishop laid hands on him. "Serve God with a clean heart," the bishop had whispered. But Marcus had stopped listening the moment he saw the golden cross around the bishop's neck. Meanwhile, something beautiful was rising from the ashes. For the first time in years, the church doors opened without a priest. Brother Nathan, a humble assistant pastor, had been asked to lead morning devotions. He wasn't eloquent like Marcus. He wasn't rich. He didn't wear designer robes. But his eyes were kind. And kindness, it turned out, was exactly what God had been waiting for. About 30 people came that first Sunday, mostly those who had fled when the church became a marketplace of pride. Tailors, market women, bus drivers, street cleaners. Some sat quietly in the back rows, still afraid. Others hesitated at the door, unsure if they were truly welcome. Brother Nathan stood at the simple altar and cleared his throat. The echo was different now, softer, more honest. "I know many of you are hurting," Brother Nathan began. His voice was gentle but carried the weight of truth. "You were shamed here. You were overlooked. You were told your clothes, your cars, your offerings weren't good enough for God." He paused, letting the words sink into wounded hearts. But God never asked for gold. He asked for a humble heart, a broken spirit, and a willing soul. One by one, people began to cry. Not the loud, performative tears of the prosperity gospel. Just silent tears of cleansing, of healing, of coming home. Mama Rosa's story had shaken them all. Her photo had gone viral across the world. Standing at the altar with her 2 dry yams, smiling. That smile haunted everyone who saw it. A smile that hid decades of pain. A smile that was mocked, then silenced forever. A middle-aged woman raised her trembling hand. "I was once told not to sing in the choir because my voice wasn't rich enough," she said. Her voice cracked with remembered pain. "I left the church for 3 years after that." A man stood up, his work clothes still stained with honest labor. "I was a janitor, and one Sunday I came straight from work in my uniform. Father Marcus told the ushers to move me outside because I was contaminating the sanctuary. That day, I stopped believing in the church altogether." Story after story poured out like water from a broken dam. People who had been bruised, overlooked, and spiritually murdered by the very place meant to be their refuge. But something miraculous was happening. They had returned. Not for the man who fell, but for the God who remained. Late that same night, Marcus walked to the empty church alone. His steps echoed in the darkness like a funeral march. He stood before the altar, now stripped of all its golden ornaments. And for the first time in decades, he fell to his knees. Not for show, not for cameras, but for his dying soul. "God," he whispered into the darkness, "I don't even know where to begin. His voice cracked like breaking glass. I thought I was serving you, but I was serving myself. He wept. Not the crocodile tears of a caught politician, but the kind of tears that burn your soul clean. I used your name to fill my stomach. I used your altar to build my image. I mocked your children. I turned your house into a marketplace of pride. How do you even look at me anymore? The silence was deafening. But in that silence, something began to shift inside him. Not an audible answer, but an awareness. A mirror to see himself clearly for the first time. He remembered Mama Rosa's face. That gentle smile. That unshakable faith. He had called her a witch. He had driven her to her death. His voice cracked as he spoke her name aloud. Forgive me, Mama Rosa. Forgive me, God. The next Sunday, something unprecedented happened. Father Marcus walked into the church. Not in his golden robes. Not with his usual parade of admirers. But in simple, plain clothes. He didn't march to the pulpit. He sat quietly in the very back row. Alone. Gasps rippled through the small congregation like electric shocks. Some people stood up, ready to leave. Others whispered frantically among themselves. Brother Nathan noticed the commotion and paused his gentle teaching. We are all sinners in need of grace, he said simply. Let him sit. After the service, Marcus approached the microphone with trembling hands. The church fell silent as death. He stood there, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. I don't expect your forgiveness, he began. His voice was barely a whisper. I don't deserve it, but I must confess. And then he did something that shocked everyone. He confessed everything. The bribes he had taken from wealthy families. The manipulation of scripture for profit. The pride that had consumed his soul like cancer. The lies he had told in God's name. The obsession with riches that had blinded him to righteousness. The humiliation of Mama Rosa that led to her death. The rejection of Chief Benjamin's disguised test. Every cruel word. Every heartless act. Every moment he had chosen gold over God. He didn't try to make excuses. He didn't try to preserve his reputation. He didn't try to look holy. He just emptied himself completely. People wept again. Not out of pain this time, but out of release. Healing was finally beginning. An elderly man named Samuel slowly walked up to Marcus. He placed a weathered hand on the fallen priest's shoulder. God gives grace to the humble, he said gently. And you, my son, are finally humble. Others joined in one by one. Not to praise Marcus, but to pray for him. A circle of forgiveness formed around the man who had once stood above them all. 6 months later, everything had changed. The church that once bore the nickname, the rich man's cathedral, was barely recognizable. Not because of the building. The marble floors still gleamed. The golden pulpit still stood. But the spirit had been completely transformed. Gone were the velvet ropes separating the important from the ordinary. Gone were the designer chairs reserved for wealthy donors. Gone were the announcements of who gave the highest offerings. Now ushers smiled at everyone the same way. Children from poor homes ran freely through the aisles. And for the first time in years, strangers felt like family. At the entrance of the church, a beautiful wooden sign now stood. God looks at the heart, not the garment. 1 Samuel 16 verse 7-inch. Inside, near the altar, hung a large portrait. It showed Mama Rosa holding her 2 small yams, smiling. Beneath it were the words, "In memory of Mama Rosa, the woman who reminded us what true worship looks like." Marcus was no longer a priest. The diocese had rightfully stripped him of his position. But he didn't leave the city. He chose to stay and serve in the shadows. He now worked with the church janitorial team, cleaning the very halls where he once strutted in designer robes. He washed toilets, swept the compound, arranged chairs every Sunday morning before the new pastor arrived. People were stunned at first. Some thought he was faking humility for sympathy. Others kept their distance, unsure if the change was real. But time revealed what words could not. Marcus had truly changed. He no longer demanded to be seen or heard. He no longer flinched at the sight of poverty. In fact, he now spent most of his time helping the poor, visiting sick members with his own money, funding scholarships for children in the community. He would sit quietly in the last row every Sunday, his head bowed not in shame, but in genuine reverence. 1 year later, it was Thanksgiving Sunday again. But this time, everything was different. No spotlights, no golden chairs, just a completely full church singing with one unified voice. From the shoemaker in the back to the businesswoman in the front. Everyone brought something. One boy brought a single orange. An old woman brought homemade bread. A bus driver brought his time as a volunteer. A child brought a song she had written. and nobody laughed. Nobody whispered cruel jokes. Everyone worshipped. The choir sang, "Come as you are, broken and whole. Your rags are welcome, your tears consoled." At the end of the service, Pastor Nathan looked toward the back and smiled. "Brother Marcus," he said gently, "please come forward." Gasps filled the room. Marcus rose slowly, his heart pounding. "No titles," Nathan added quickly. "Just a servant of God." Marcus walked to the altar and was handed a small gift. A simple Bible with worn edges. "We don't reward you for your past," Nathan said, "but we honor the journey you've taken. Let this be a reminder that God can raise even the fallen if they truly repent." Tears filled Marcus's eyes. He held the Bible close to his chest. But then something happened that no one expected. A woman's voice called out from the back of the church, "Marcus?" Everyone turned. A woman stepped forward from the shadows. She was elderly, leaning on a wooden cane. Her face was weathered, but her eyes sparkled with life. The entire church gasped in unison. It was Mama Rosa. Alive. But you died," someone shouted. "We saw the accident." Mama Rosa smiled that same gentle smile. "I was in a coma for 8 months," she said softly. "I woke up 3 days ago. The doctors called it a miracle, but I call it God's timing." She walked slowly toward Marcus, who had fallen to his knees in shock. "I forgive you, my son," she whispered. "God sent me back to tell you that redemption is real, and that love always wins." The church erupted in shouts of joy and amazement. But Marcus just wept, because he finally understood the most shocking truth of all. God's mercy is greater than our worst mistakes. And sometimes miracles come disguised as second chances. Remember, dear viewers, the church is not for the proud but for the humble. And God's grace can resurrect even the most fallen souls.
If this heart-wrenching emotional story has touched something deep in you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.